I just got a review, and has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less than average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed up but cheap ABC talent. See if you can guess which former president just posted that on Truth. Anyone? No? Well, thank you, President Trump. Thank you for watching. I'm surprised you're still... Isn't it past your jail time?
The hate watching is a thing. We all know that around here, too. Hi again, everyone. Wasn't that good? It's 5 o'clock in New York. What a moment. That was last night's Academy Awards. It was a moment that was so amusing because it just got right at the truth of Trump. Trump hasn't been sentenced to prison, yet he's facing a whopping 91 felony counts across 4 criminal cases, the first of which goes to trial 2 weeks from today. In that case itself, he was charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records, each carrying a maximum sentence of 4 years. But Trump's legal battles don't stop there. 2 massive civil trials of his have wrapped in recent months, and while their penalties do not include any jail time, he's looking at some huge fines. He was found liable for fraud in the state of New York, where he needs to pay nearly $500 million. And just before that, he was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation when it came to writer E. Jean Carroll's cases. Trump posted a $91.6 million bond on Friday in the Carroll case, a sum of money that for a normal person would give one pause from doing the thing that got them in that much trouble in the first place, speaking out against her, defaming her again. But as we know, Trump is no normal defendant or person. Over the weekend, he repeated the same claims about her that got him in trouble in the first place. At a rally in Georgia, Trump said again that he didn't know Carroll and that her accusation was false. And just this morning, during a phoner on CNBC, Trump referred to her as Miss Bergdorf Goodman, alluding to the department store where Carroll says he sexually assaulted her. That comment came mere hours before Carroll's attorney, Robbie Kaplan, notified the judge that they agreed to Friday's bond payment. Now, Kaplan did not directly address the latest comments from Trump, but said in a separate statement this, quote, "The statute of limitations for defamation in most jurisdictions is between 1 and 3 years. As we said after the last jury verdict, we continue to monitor every statement that Donald Trump makes about our client, E. Jean Carroll." Here's what she said after E. Jean's second trial ended.
You're confident he won't do it again. What happens if he does?
I can't be confident about anything Donald Trump does.
All options are on the table.
What does that mean?
If we have to bring another case, we'll bring another case. He's just going to be more money.
More money. As attorney George Conway points out, Trump's latest comments about Carroll could present trouble for the ex-president. He writes this, quote, "The fact that Trump libeled E. Jean Carroll on CNBC is highly significant for a procedural reason, in addition to a substantive one. Were E. Jean to sue Trump just for the speech he gave in Northwest Georgia the other day, she would have had to sue in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. But now that he libeled her on Squawk Box, which is anchored in Manhattan, she may now sue in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. If she does that, the case would be assigned to Judge Lewis Kaplan as a case related to the earlier 2 cases that produced $88.3 million in damages awards." Donald Trump continuing to step in it by defaming E. Jean Carroll even after paying a bond of more than $90 million is where we begin the hour with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. Former top official at the Department of Justice and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann is here. With me at the table, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin's back, and former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards is still with us. Andrew Weissmann, I start with you. Take us to law school. What's going on at Roberta Kaplan's conference room table?
Well, you know, I want to step back first to big picture, which is Donald Trump is really running as an outlaw. And
so true.
He's running in the same way that John Gotti went, the former boss of the Gambino family. John Gotti's defense was not that I didn't do it. It was basically, what's it to you? Why do you care? And the continued statements that could form another defamation suit is basically, I'm incorrigible, my base doesn't care, and I'm going to continue doing it. And both what you're seeing in the civil E. Jean Carroll case, what you're seeing with the desperate attempts to avoid a criminal trial are all part of the same sort of presentation, which is I am just presenting my spin, my disinformation, my unchecked invective, and I don't want to be ever in a forum, in a courtroom, where facts and law matter. And that's why you're seeing these sort of crazy immunity motions being made for cases that were brought, the gravamen is before he was president, cases where the gravamen is after he was president, saying, wait a second, I can't ever be sued. And I think that with respect to these statements, I think George Conway has it exactly right. This basically could be a great annuity for both E. Jean Carroll and her law firm, because if he continues making these statements, and especially if he is making them before in the Southern District of New York, we've seen this movie. We know how this ends because we saw the second trial, and there's no reason to think that there would be any different, other than, remember, what the jury is asked is, what is the sum of money that would get him to stop? And so if it went from $5 million the first time around to 85 the second time around, there's no reason to think it's not going to continue that exponential trajectory in terms of the consequences for him.
So I'm going to deal with your brilliant political analysis in a minute, because that he's running as an outlaw is so astute. But I want to stay with your legal mind. I mean, as a prosecutor, what is the profile of someone who can't be regulated by financial penalties?
Well, this is where there is one more thing that the parties, can do, and this was something that you saw a little bit in the Judge Engoron civil case brought by the Attorney General, which was barring Donald Trump for a period of time from doing business in New York, and that is in form of what's called injunctive relief, meaning that money is not going to be sufficient to protect the victims here. And that kind of relief, that injunction saying, you know what, you now need to just clam up. That's polite terminology and not exactly legal terminology. That was something that was sought by Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss with respect to Rudy Giuliani in connection with their defamation case, which they won, but then Rudy Giuliani declared bankruptcy. But that issue of whether at some point you're going to have some sort of injunction against the former president to stop him from defaming E. Jean Carroll, I find very tantalizing as a prospect. Just remember, if the former president were to violate an injunction, that all sorts of sanctions can come up at that point, including jail. If you violate intentionally a court order, that is contempt of court. And so that is the kind of thing which, of course, courts don't like to do. But at some point, when you've got a victim like E. Jean Carroll, who is, just remember, jury found she's not only been repeatedly defamed, she was sexually assaulted. There is one and only one victim in that case, and it is E. Jean Carroll, as has been found by a court of law. So at some point, it'll be interesting to see whether they take that step of seeking an injunction, not just continued damages, which clearly are not working.
E. Jean